Hi, and welcome to the It's a Good Start podcast with your hosts Mike Lander and Kevin Givens. The aim of our show is to help scale-up entrepreneurs master the best of what other people have already figured out so that you can unlock your own potential. We started it because we've both been entrepreneurs for over 25 years and wanted to share our knowledge and our guest knowledge. We're all about actionable insights. We want you to take away one or two things per episode that can help you move the ball forward in your business. We really hope you enjoy and keep coming back for more. So, Katie, welcome to It's a Good Start podcast. Thank you ever so much for joining us and for taking out some time of your diary.
Thank you for having me, Mike. It's always lovely to chat to you. So I'm really excited to hopefully share some of the do's and don'ts of being an agency leader and an entrepreneur today.
And on that point, who are you? What do you do? What's your background?
Good question. So I guess I would say been lucky enough to always work in new business marketing. I must say I didn't come out of school thinking, I know I want to go and work in marketing and sales, but that is what happened. And quite by accident, I started my career in the world of advertising, working for United Advertising back in the day, where I got some brilliant sales training. I then ended up being the very first field salesperson actually for Exchange and Mart, going around selling
that?
ad
absolutely.
space to motor traders. That was great fun.
Wow, selling ad space. Oh, that's difficult.
Hard and great. I literally used to I started off in the call center. I was with them for quite a long time, actually, 3-4 years, which I guess is quite a long time for your first job. But I started at 17. I literally went straight from school. I did
5 years ago, Katie.
I know, yeah, exactly. And still look just as youthful. So I went from doing my kind of A levels. I didn't do basically I don't do anything normally, by the way, guys. I'm totally out there. So I didn't do A levels at school. I did a GNVQ in business because I literally had no idea what I wanted to do. I think at one point I thought I wanted to be a hairdresser. Literally no idea. So thought I'll study business. So I did a GNVQ in business, which is like equivalent of A levels, but also had a placement in a solicitor's. My dad was a solicitor. Brilliant. So I thought maybe that would be good. And then I bought my first property when I was 18.
Wow.
So when I was 70 and I knew I was getting some money, I was like, inherited a little bit of inheritance, wasn't huge. Wow. But I was like, I'm not going to go to uni. I want, and things at home weren't great for me when I was younger. So that's another story. Yeah. So I needed to have some stability. So my nan was like,
but Katie, that background, it forms us.
Important.
It shapes us.
Yeah. So important.
When I was adopted. At 6
really?
months old. Yeah.
I did not know that. So okay, well, let's tell a bit of that story then. So I'm going way back now. So so I'd had a bit of a rocky time. My mum had a nervous breakdown when I was 11. Oh, no. She's got bipolar. She's still very poorly, sadly, today. Well, on and periods of good, periods of bad. She's also an alcoholic. She met a very controlling, horrible man. Who died. I think that was kind of, meant to happen for whatever reason. Anyway, I actually moved out of home and I can't believe I'm sharing some of this. I actually lived in a hostel when I was 16. Wow. I come from quite a middle-class family. It was really bizarre. Like I grew up near Sandbanks, like in a beautiful house, but the at-home relationship was so fraught. As soon as I turned 16, I was like, I want to get out. And we had, because there was various other things going on, we had a social services person that used to come and check on me and my brother, which you never think happens in sort of middle class, upper middle. You just think that's in council estates and a different world. Yeah. It does. So anyway, so I had this kind of, and I was like, look, I want to get out. So I moved out at 16. So as soon as so this is the real story. So then as soon as I had,
describe being in a hostel.
Do you know, it sounds horrible.
Will not understand what that looks like.
It wasn't actually that bad, but it was, I had a blow up sofa. Wow. I literally had no money. So I had a blow up sofa, it was blue plastic blow up sofa, like one that you put on the beach.
I remember.
That was my sofa.
Yeah.
in my tiny little room. But the girl next door was actually a kind of friend of mine. So we had, a shared bathroom. I can't even properly remember it, to be honest. We had a shared bathroom. Yep. There were lots of young children-ish, people between the age maybe of 16 and 20, maybe even some that were younger. but it gave me, I'm very young at the age of 16 was fending for myself. I was managing my money. Probably not very well, but I was managing my money. I had a job. I knew that I had to go to work. So I was doing an apprenticeship. I was paying my rent. I was basically super, super young. I learn a lot about having to survive and not really having anyone else to rely on. And I think without going through the whole story of then where my career
had to make money. You have to make money because no one's giving it to you.
And do you know what that is? I would say the biggest thing that has made me successful is not, I mean, hopefully I'm quite clever and I know what I'm doing.
You're very clever, Katie.
I'm not sure if I always am, but the key thing is that I take action, because there's fear in me that I know that if I don't do something, no one else is there. I do not wait. So if I can see trouble brewing ahead, 5 steps earlier than probably most people will be going, right, I need to do X, Y, and Z to make sure I'm secure. And that's why I'm good at new business, because I know it needs to always be on. I always need to be networking. I always need to be talking. I put effort in doing things like this because I enjoy doing it and I get to learn, but also I know it's important for me to, put myself out there. So I had, not the easiest of starts, but actually landed in quite by accident in a career and a world which I loved. So the grounding that I had from United Advertising, and they probably looked after me as well. I was 17 when I started there.
They gave you a chance.
They did give me a chance, because I remember going for that interview with the MD of Exchange and Mart and thinking, God, my first job, I was on 11.5 grand basic. Yeah. But I left that company at 21, I think, when I moved to London, and then went to work for bigger magazines, EMAP, FHM and stuff, which was a great, step for me. But I remember I was on 11.5 grand. I left, I think, on 30 something.
Yeah,
and that's a long time ago to be on that kind of money. I think I was on 27, 28 or something.
Yeah.
And then,
money.
I was their top salesperson.
Yeah.
They used to do great incentives. I loved it. I got my TV for my flat in there from there, because we used to win stuff like the highest performing salesperson. And because I'm, incredibly ambitious, I was always at the top. So I was always smashing it, always, I've never been an aggressive salesperson, but just, I was like, I know how to work people to kind of get what I want a lot of the time. So I know how to use, the psychology of sales.
Ethically. You do it with authenticity. I know you.
Yeah.
You don't manipulate people. You're not that kind of sleazy manipulation. It's like you're authentic. You give everything. You're out there, and and people want to work with you. You're an infectious person in a good way.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully. But I think that I truly believe when you work in sales, it's so important. Every business and every person needs to know how to sell and needs to know how to sell well. But you shouldn't really think about it as sales. I mean, sales, some people don't like the word, a dirty word. At the end of the day, I was helping people. Even when I was back at United Advertising, I was writing adverts for my motor trader mates that were going to help them sell cars. And they truly did. And every week, I remember we used to have a deadline on a Monday, and I'd be typing the adverts. I'd be going, what have you got for me? And I'd be trying to persuade them to give me more cars.
You know the questions I set up? Yeah?
Yes. Yeah, I know. Sorry, we've gone right down a totally different. Right down a totally different.
But that's the beauty of it.
Yeah,
that's why me and Kevin do this.
Yeah, but it was, I used to love. I would be chatting to them, and we used to work a long day on a Monday. I always remember this, from 9 till 8. I think we did. It was 11-hour day, and you literally, it would close and go to print at 8 o'clock.
Yep.
So I'd be going to them, come on, give it. You must have another car for me. Go on, and they'd be going, oh no, I don't know. I was like, come on, yes, you have. What about that one? Did that one sell last week? But they'd be telling me, oh, last week 2-3 cars sold off the ads. Thank you, it's done really well. Because I was responsible for writing them.
In negotiation, I have this thing. So sometimes you get time expiring offers, but they're not real, because you come back next week and there's still an offer and you can still negotiate something. With an advert or with fruit that perishes, there's a true deadline. When the deadline's gone, that slot's finished. That deal is no longer available because you've gone to print.
Yeah.
So at probably in the last hour before the deadline, you'd be like, off we go. Right, I've got a few slots left.
Yeah. And do you know what? I loved that energy.
I imagine you would.
It was amazing. You know, it was really, a bit like pitching, you know, it was really good fun. You'd be like, right, because you'd be throughout the day, I'd be phoning all my motor traders going, and then they'd be phoning back and they'd be going, oh, have I missed the deadline? No, you come on, you need, and they'd be trying to phone
like,
me.
Well, you've got about half an hour.
Yeah,
do exactly. A deal, you do it now.
And they'd be reading them out to me over the phone. I'd be typing them. It was mad, but it was great fun. And I think that grounding, you know, the sales technique and they took
and the hit the phones technique. You've got to hit the phones.
Yeah,
you can't wait for it to ring.
Yeah, exactly. And but they spent 2 weeks with me before I was even allowed to sit on the sales floor. And all I did was, you know, old school, I guess, you know, doing practice calls and you know, talking through. We did kind of have a bit of a script that we would follow, but not always. But it was, honestly, that job was such a great ground and I loved it. I literally enjoyed it. I then stayed in advertising, and the short story is, you know, from that I then started working in advertising in London, worked for bigger magazines and bigger publishers like FHM. I then was poached by a brand and worked in sales and marketing for a big drinks brand, and then moved to a startup drinks brand. So that was interesting, and also again, I was best salesperson there in the sales team at the drinks brand, trying to get our, you know, champagnes and vodkas listed in all the best clubs.
That's right.
Doing deals with Soho House and Harrods, and it was great. Again, a really great fun job. And then
just talk to me for a second, just because as we go on the journey down the rabbit warren.
Yes.
So how do you get into Harrods? How do you get into Harvey Nicks? How do you get into Intercontinental? How do you get listed when they don't know you? What happens? Just talk us through. What do you do?
Yes, I mean, gosh, I've got two views on this. So first job, I was very lucky. I worked for Pernod Ricard. They knew the brands. We had, you know, I was working for Stolich Schneier, Absolute, Perrier Jouet Champagne, Mum Champagne. We had some really great brands in our portfolio. But then, you know, I was up against LVMH and, you know, for things like, we used to call it house pour, you know, they would want there'd be other people that were cheaper or brands that said they tasted better. So
exactly.
It was all built really on relationships. You know, I would go in and do tastings. And I think I was probably a bit of a breath of fresh air. At this point, I was still very young, 21, 22, took a job from a guy who was probably 10 years older than me. And most of the people in my industry were at that point, sadly, men, not sadly, but like still.
Exactly.
So I think I was a bit different, you know, and brave, and they probably thought, God, who's this? You know,
how do you get the meeting? Do you hit the phones? How do you get the meeting?
I just honestly used to just walk into the bars and the clubs and that was it. I mean, that was the bravery that I had. I would literally walk up to the bar, talk to one of the barmen. If we weren't already listed in there, I'd be like, can you go and get your bar manager, please? Because I need to talk to him about my champagne. And then I'd be like, you know, I can give you a free bottle of champagne. Do you want to try it? I'll come in and do a tasting. But literally, I had no fear. I would just go into, and used to do the same with the motor traders. I'd drive up to a garage that wasn't on our books and be like, they're not on the books. I'm going to walk in and talk to the owner of the garage and I'll get them on the books. And I think that sales bravery has always been in me, because I've you know, the biggest thing is I've always believed in the businesses, the products, the services that we do. And I think in order to do a good job, that for me was really important. I've been offered jobs at other places and I was like, I don't believe in that brand, or it doesn't feel right for me. I was really passionate about the brands that I worked for, and the, you know, FHM and Exchange and Mart. We were always up against Auto Trader. I believed in our offering and I believed we were better, which really helped.
Katie, this is kind of the weird thing. And again, I'm going to get Kevin in at this point. But I am hopeless at outbound. If I've got a cold, I need to generate some sales. I must pick up the phone. I'll need to walk in somewhere, go and meet people. I need to go to a networking event. I don't like it. Not good at it. Don't like it. When I find an opportunity, either through a network referral, which is quite a lot, an existing client that refers me, I like to think I'm pretty good when I'm in front of the right person. My close rate, because I track it like you do, my close rate at the back end of the funnel is very, very strong. But my ability to generate leads at the front end is very poor. Kevin, what's your experience of exactly this lead gen point? Because we're having the same discussions at Resignal all the time.
Yeah, definitely. I think to one of Katie's earlier points, you've got to believe in the product of what you're doing, because if you're doing something that you believe in, then you can sell it. And I think in that case, you're helping. So I think if it's a colder approach, our version of a cold approach is we invite someone to an event and then we'll kind of educate rather than try and oversell to them. But I think it is that mindset of, I've got something that can help you. And by the way, this is what it will cost, as opposed to, I want to win for myself. And it's got to be win-win. I think that's the key thing. So,
but your approach is events. It's easier to ask someone to an event because you're not asking them for money. Just come along to an event.
Yeah, and it's just that always be educating style of, if we're helping people, and then if we help enough people, they'll refer us or be interested. And if they're not interested, then fine, we'll just help other people and hopefully they'll be interested. But that's kind of my approach. And
sorry, go on.
No, just generally, I think that works. It's not that aggressive. There's always more we could do that we're leaving on the table. But I just feel like a lot of it, for me, stems from, what are your strengths, what are your values, and then play to that, as opposed to, yes, someone else could do something and it would be successful another way. But if that's not what you're good at, then I would focus on your strengths instead.
So Katie, for your business, I mean, you're in the business of helping other businesses drive new business. That is your core. How do you do it for yourself? What's the there's no silver bullet, but what's the thing that works for you the best?
Yeah, great question. And do you know what? I'm sorry to say this to all of my lovely clients who may well end up listening to this, but we do it better for ourselves than we do it for anyone else.
Right.
Because most clients, sadly, give up and they're not consistent. And I know and understand the power of consistency.
So do I.
And
absolutely.
that people that I was speaking to 2 or 3 years ago are only now coming to me with opportunities.
So longest sales cycle, Katie? What's your longest sales cycle?
Do you know what? It's really hard to track. So if we look from, it depends when you class someone as an MQL.
When you first meet them. Meet them. Have an engagement with them.
But that's, that's saying that I actually now started to track things in HubSpot all the way back to when the first webinar they attended, or the first, basically, if you start to look at that, then on the whole, it's years. Obviously, there's the opportunity to win process as well, which often is shorter. And we've got a range of, again, for that, sometimes, it's good to track these things. So, because it helps you plan for the future.
My longest is 10 years.
Yeah, there we go. So from MQL to
James.
win. Yeah.
James, if you're listening, it's you. It's 10 years. That's how long it took. But it was a big deal when we sold it. 10 years. Because you keep on staying in touch.
Yeah.
Doing the right
that
thing.
is so important. It is about consistency. And we've spoken about this, Mike, before when we did the live podcast for my podcast for Word on the Street. But that was, so eye-opening for me, because I think we all look at, so just so you guys know that are listening, we had one of the guests was Grace Andrews. She runs and is the power behind the Diary of a CEO podcast and Stephen Bartlett's Fame. But she said the first 2 years, it was not crap, but they were getting a few thousand listens every single month.
That's right.
It took 2 years, but they stuck at it. They kept improving. They kept trying new things. Most people would have got to 6 months and canned it, going, this podcast isn't working for us.
Exactly.
And I can tell you the same. I mean, obviously my podcast isn't at the scale of
yours is working.
Stephen's,
I've checked the
but it
numbers out.
works.
Yours definitely works.
It works. And, it's really hard with podcasts because you can't, the numbers never look as great as I would want. We've got a very niche audience. Then the numbers never look quite as good as you hope, because you can also only ever see downloads. But what I do know is the amount of inquiries that I get off the back of it. So whatever you do.
Just hold on that. Right. So if you go back 5 years and you were looking for new leads from podcasts, my view would be you probably get virtually none. Yeah. Now, I think it's one of the untapped opportunities in all of the different marketing channels that you've got. Yeah. I've won, well, I talked about it on your podcast. I've won some big deals off the back of people hearing me on a podcast.
Yeah.
Because it's authentic. They hear my voice, they hear who I am, they hear what I believe, they hear what my challenging thoughts are, they hear the personality. People now know you had a tough childhood, and that shaped you as a person. Because you're authentic. Kevin?
Yeah.
Podcasts and lead gen?
I think it's about where the audience is. Like, I get asked this question quite a lot about, is SEO going to die? And like, my answer is, as long as people are searching in Google, I think we'll be all right. But it's the same sort of thing where I used to read a lot of books, still do occasionally, but nowhere near as what I used to. And I used to read quite a lot of articles in the industry and stuff like that. And again, there might be one or two that would grab my attention, but certainly nowhere near. But I would listen to 3 or 4 podcast episodes a week quite easily, just go out for a walk. And I think it's where the audience is that's most important. That may change again in the future, but I do feel like, kind of audio and video has definitely risen a lot. I think there's probably more that's to come. And if that's how people want to consume content, it becomes more important in some respects to create audio and video content than it is to create written content. If that's where, and again, this will be different to everyone. But if that's where the bulk of your audience is, and you're not doing it, you're clearly missing out. So
interestingly,
I think
if you look at the
really
stats,
important.
So I've been tracking quite a lot of podcast stats, advertising, sponsorship, listening time, drop-off times. What they're finding is, unsurprisingly, I guess, when we listen to a podcast, we're actually using focus time. We'll focus for 20 minutes, half an hour. I mean, Kevin, I know you do longer, but a lot of people, 20 minutes, they'll focus on listening to that podcast, because we're doing it apparently when we are driving to work, when we're doing a commute, when we're doing something in the home. So you've got someone's attention. They'll be doing something else, but normally the other thing is something that's repetitive or straightforward to do. They're tuning into you. They're tuning into what you're saying. That's really hard with other mediums like a blog. Very hard to get someone to read something for 20 minutes. Really hard. Really hard.
Well, you lose concentration. So I'm a really strong believer in not just podcasts, but any kind of content that enables you to build a more real relationship with your potential prospects and your audience, because that's what it's all about, building relationships. And podcasts are great at that, because, I mean, look, you've got to be confident enough to do them. You've got to have something to talk about, and you've got to understand why you're doing it. If you're doing it for lead gen, or you're doing it to, create your personal brand, and probably all of those things, it benefits my business with so much. But the other thing that is incredibly important, and I think people forget sometimes, is I have so many people that have never listened to my podcast, have told me they've never listened to the podcast, but because we shatter the content, they see it on LinkedIn. They're like, oh, I get all the best bits. I don't need to listen to the full episode because you put some really great clips on LinkedIn, and we create little slide shares with the top 5 takeaways, which perform really highly on LinkedIn. We actually write an email and tell everyone what they can hear that we send to people. We do a write-up on the website that sits next to it. We create a video version which goes onto YouTube, and we transcribe the whole thing. If you start to think about what one podcast can create for me is 15 different pieces of content. It's not just the podcast. So great that people are listening to me on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and wherever else. But and that's why the podcast stats, to a certain degree, I'm like, doesn't really matter, because if I then look at the reach that I get for the posts on LinkedIn, where every single post is reaching, 5, 10, 15, 20,000 people, that is where the power comes from. And the podcast enables me to do that. And if you start to shatter your content and really, think about how you can make more of all of your assets, what's going to be the easiest thing for you to do and repeatably do week in, week out. And that's really important as well. And then start to think about the different channels you can push it out on via email, on the different channels that it's hosted on. Use your social channels. LinkedIn, we're doing quite a bit now on Instagram. We're also starting to trial TikTok. Go and follow me on TikTok, please. So try these things, push it out. Generate more content from the content that you're producing. Think about tactics that are going to enable you to shatter the content more easily, because it's going to make your life easier.
And I think, Kevin, I think you mentioned this to me 3 years ago. It's the Gary Vaynerchuk principle.
Yeah.
There was a big article about, I think he calls it the pyramid technique or something.
He does.
And it's about that. He records something big, but then he's got like hundreds of micro assets that he sends out on different channels. And he says, it's not rocket science. Do great content, do a video, do a podcast, and then chop it up and use it.
Yeah. And I can't remember. We actually have an in-house team who do it, and it wasn't going to save us that much time, and we didn't really need it at the time, but maybe I should review it. And I'll try and come back to you. But we've looked at the platform that Gary uses to create that content at scale. And there's so many platforms out there that can help you do this, guys. Honestly, I will try and find the name of it if I can.
If you do,
and send it
let
to
us
you.
know, and then we'll stick it in the link.
Put it in the show notes. So there's so many tools out there that can help you do this at scale. You've got to start somewhere, and consistency is absolutely key. But if you can shatter your content, that is going to really help you.
So actually what I was going to do is kind of try and tie it back to what you were saying originally about your story, and kind of the fact that I think you had to fend for yourself in the early days. And even to the point, I wrote down a quote that I quite like, but it's like, no one's coming to save you, which I think a lot of people find that quite scary. But I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, you flip it the other way, and it's actually, I've got to do something for myself and make this happen. And you can turn that into a motivator. But it sounds like, in terms of what you've had that entrepreneurial spirit since a very early stage, and you might have been within an employee within a company, but you're still trying to push and learn, and whether that's sales, and maybe there's a competitive side to you want to sell, and certainly being like a high achieving salesperson, moving into just podcasting. And it sounds like what may drive you is actually just trying new things. It's not necessarily, certainly for myself, I think I used to be a lot more competitive, say in my 20s, than I am now. And maybe that changes. But I think it sounds like for you, it's trying new things, understanding where the audience is, and just being curious and having a go.
Totally. And do you know what? That is a big part of my personality, whether I would have had that without the upbringing and the things that happened to me, throughout my life. That I don't know. But the key is, I am not afraid to take risks. I am a natural risk taker, because I always think, well, I've been through worse. I know I can get through it.
Exactly.
Well, it's never going to be that bad.
But because, Katie, you've seen worse. So you actually have a very, I'm guessing, a very, there's emotional triggers inside you, which you know what worse looks like. So you know what much worse looks like. So in relative terms, picking up the phone, it's a walk in the park.
Yeah, exactly. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say they don't want to work with us.
Yeah.
So and that isn't really, nothing gained, nothing lost. Yeah,
Okay.
Nothing gained, nothing lost.
If you don't ask them, they're not going to work with you anyway. So
exactly.
Exactly. So nothing gained, nothing lost. So I think I definitely have that kind of attitude. And you've also picked up on something else, which I think, as an entrepreneur, look, every entrepreneur is different, but most of us, I am incredibly inquisitive. Yes. I always want to be a step ahead. I'm always looking at new innovations, new tech that can help us do our jobs better. I'm never afraid to try something new. I really encourage all of my team to go and, investigate new platforms, make sure. I want to be all constantly 5 steps ahead of everyone else. And that's because I want to be able to offer the best possible service to my clients. And I don't want there to be any stone left unturned. I want to know everything there is to know. And it does make it hard, certainly for my team sometimes, because I think, leaders of businesses are a certain type of person, and I'm constant, not everyone is like me, and I'm constantly trying to pull them along and get people to catch up, and not everyone is able to work at the pace that I naturally work at, which is a challenge in itself, because I put probably my team often under quite a bit of pressure and stress, because I'm encouraging them to be more proactive, to look at that. I want them, because I'm kind of like cramming everything in and doing everything. I expect people to be the same, but actually not everyone's like that. So that's an interesting leadership skill that I've been getting some training on, is how do I motivate and encourage people to get the most out of them and not make them feel like their head's going to blow off.
But also, Katie, the motivation's completely different.
Yes,
it's your business.
Yeah.
And no one's going to save you.
Yes.
And when that happens, you will work 16-hour days, because, what drives me out of bed every morning, all sorts of things. One of them is, having been adopted, is the fear of, well, it might all go away again. It might all vanish. So I've got to get up and I've got to keep going, because I've got to make sure the family's okay. I've got to keep going. And that's a very deep-rooted motivator for me. Your teams won't have that because it's not their business.
No.
Your business.
Yeah. But some people do show up. And I mean, look, it's very hard, isn't it? Some people do. And I think I did, throughout working, I remember ex-bosses of mine saying to me, gosh, Katie, if we cut you in half, you'd have the brand name running through your veins. Like, you're that passionate about it, because that's how I am. And there are amazing, I've got amazing staff in my business who potentially are entrepreneurs, really themselves, but I'm lucky enough to have them. But it's really hard. You've got to understand, I think, as a business leader, how to motivate people because everyone's different. Like you say, everyone's had a different life experience. That innovation, or that experience gives businesses innovation, I think, where you've got different people. So you can't, I don't want everyone to be a carbon copy of me in street. I need people that, think about things a bit more and aren't as risk taking as I am, because that gives us that, diversity of thought. And actually that's where innovation comes from as well.
Yeah, but equally, you don't want to take those ideas away. It's how do you harness them? And I think there's one thing I quite liked is, I don't know if I've used this, Jeff Bezos wrote a letter ages ago, which was day one. It's every day is day one. And it's not that you take anything that you've achieved from before to now for granted, not at all. But it's how do you always have that mentality of what can we improve? How do we make it better? Because everything can be improved. There's no person or company in the world that can't do something better. And I think that definitely seems to be a trait across entrepreneurs of how do we take this and improve it, make it different, and just keep striving to move forward. It's that progress that I think is the big motivator. And if you feel like you're moving forward, then that's great. And if you feel like you're stagnating, it's quite often, what's the point? Why are we doing this?
Change.
So true.
Katie, so for the listeners, what are the two big things you'd say? Someone that's kind of, they've got their own business, they've got to maybe $1 million of turnover, they've got a few people, they're trying to scale. What would be your couple of things, particularly around that kind of driving business growth, which you're so expert at? What would you say to them?
So first of all, it's, I guess, understanding where you want to go. I'm always surprised the amount of businesses and agencies that I talk to that don't have their kind of KPIs and what their new business targets and their business targets need to be. They'll often know, we want to do this turnover. Okay, well, how does that break down? How are you going to get there? So first of all, understand where it is you want to go. Secondly, some of the stuff that I guess we've talked about is, understand the needs of your audience and create helpful content that is going to pull them in, and do it consistently. And don't be afraid. I would say people procrastinate. I've spoken to agencies and tech companies and various different B2B businesses that sit on this kind of stuff for months and months and months because they can't get internal agreement. Honestly, my biggest piece of advice is just get a plan and just fucking do it, and then keep doing it. If you don't see great results in the first 6 months, you may not see great results in the first 6 months. Keep doing it. Unless you really get terrible results and you're seeing zero engagement, and then maybe your subjects are wrong. But if you're getting engagement, but you're not getting leads straight away, then keep going, keep doing it. Look at different tactics, make sure that you've got all of the different types of content, from that insights content to the prove it pieces in the case studies, and make it easy for people to buy you by developing gateway products or services that they can get a taste of working with you on. Design it, do it, and just keep going. That's my biggest piece of advice. Brilliant.
Katie, where can people find out more about you?
Well, first of all, of course, come and find me on LinkedIn, Katie Street. You can also, of course, come and listen to me on the Word on the Street podcast. I will make sure that I give you guys a shout out on the podcast as well.
Thank
you. And also go and check out the Street Agency website, street.agency. Or I now, of course, also have Tamba with my fantastic co-founders, which is a new biz and marketing learning and development platform. And there's some great content on there from Mike, which you must go and listen to. So you can also go and check out Tamba, TANBA.io. That is the agency new business academy.io. So tamba.io, street.agency. Find me on LinkedIn.
Katie, you've been amazing. Thank you. And thank you for being so honest and open and just authentic and frank. It's been really, really fun.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you, Kevin, too. And Mike, same back to you. Thank you for opening up about your story too. I really appreciate that.
Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope you learned something new and useful about entrepreneurship. We'd love it if you could rate or review us on the app you use to listen to this on. Thanks.